Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Botanical Society of South Africa's Conservation Webinar. I'm Rupert Koopman, presenting on behalf of the Botanical Society, and today is a celebration. It's 20 years of the custodians of rare and endangered wildflowers. A spectacular citizen science program, which we're happy to have in South Africa. And I chuckled because I recently read a piece which referred to crew as custodians of rare and endangered wildlife, and that just shows how much work we still got to do from a plant perspective. But yeah, we are so grateful for the crew program, the work that's been done, and we really want to just be talking about how it's affected us and influenced us, not just from a plant conservation point of view, but as people. And as such, I want a couple of things to happen in the chat. I see already that the Greaves from KZN have put their names in the chat, so please let us know where you're tuning in from. And then also, as we go on, just put some of your crew memories in the chat, and I'd like to put them together and send them to the team. Because the thing about crew and other programs which are successful is that you get to a point of almost team building where you can move on and do things even when everyone is not available. So in that way, I just want to say that the crew team, 2/3 of the people on the poster are actually in field, and that's definitely the crew way. And we've got them pre-recorded. So how we're running today is that we'll start out with an interview that I did with Domitilla and Ismail. So that's, for those who don't know, Domitilla Raimondo and Ismail Ebrahim, basically the originators of the crew program. And then we've got Suvarna Parbhoo-Mohan live here, who will drill down into some of the numbers behind crew. And then we've got a couple of other recordings from people at different stages of their crew career or crew journey. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to find that video, and then we'll see what happens. As usual, we will be broadcasting or going through all the talks and then having a Q&A session afterwards. But thank you for putting aside time to be here, and let's hear from the original crew team. Good afternoon, Tilla and Ismail. We are pre-recording this because you are both going to be in the field at the time of the webinar. So we were really wanting to get some of the more kind of personal reflection of when crew started 20 odd years ago. So I'm going to start with yourself, Tilla. What was the motivation for starting crew?
So we started crew back in 2003, and the motivation at the time was that we had really little information about threatened plants and rare species, and we were busy with a huge national red list, but most of the information was coming from herbariums records, so we just didn't have the data we needed. And then the other motivation came from the main funder of the fynbos biome at the time, called the CAPE program. And that funder, the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, had a focus on civil society. And so they requested that we don't just have scientists go look for special plants, but that we look at involving civil society. So then we looked around and we found some examples like the amazing Darling Flora group. And we thought, hey, well, actually, members of the public can help us look for plants if we train them up. And so Ismail and I had no idea if it would work, but we gave it a bash. And we put this proposal together for 3 years to try work with citizens. And here we are 20 years later with the most amazing network of citizen scientists.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Ismail, I'm going to bring you in here. What were the aims of the program then? And I think you can take it from 3 years and then go onward.
Yeah, so in that initial project, our main focus was establishing 6 groups, and we were at that time just working in the Cape. And so we focused on building partnerships with the likes of BotSoc and looking at people that were botanically inclined and that had some botanical knowledge. And we found quite a few of the volunteers that have participated and contributed to the project through the BotSoc network. But then we also identified these like really key areas that needed monitoring work, particularly, and found some amazing champions in the landscape. And so in the beginning, it was really focused on doing monitoring, going out, and as the red list process was also starting at the same time. So it was really key for us to go out and find this information that was missing, like the population numbers of species, what were the threats. And I think one of the key things at the time was also that we didn't just want to make it about collecting data, but we also tried to focus on these critical areas that had lots of threatened plants on them, and engaging the civil society to not only monitor the plants and collect data, but to also get involved actively in making sure that these very special places are conserved as well. So I think in a nutshell, that was really the start of the program. And I think based on the first 3 years of the project, we had amazing success, and we managed to find these incredible champions in the landscape, and it just grew from there. And it just started in the Cape, but then the idea grew that this could be a national program, a nationally implemented program. And early on we were thinking about the sustainability of the project over the long term. And I think those first 3 years of CEP funding really gave us the indication and the idea that 3 years was just not enough for the amount of data we required. So this needed to be a long-term project. And I think that's when we started looking at formulating partnerships with the likes of BotSoc, a formal partnership with BotSoc, and strengthening our position within SANBI, and connecting the crew program very closely with the red listing process. And I think that's really been one of the highlights of the program over the time that we've been doing this project, is that the data feeds directly into a national process. Yeah, and 20 years later, we are national program, and we're still going strong, and still many of the volunteers that started with us back in 2003, they are still there contributing.
Cool, including me. So T, just checking if there's anything that you wanted to add on there, but then second part of the question from me is whether you think you reached those goals, because that's quite a big ask.
Yeah, so I'm very privileged to be the person who still does the red list assessments for South Africa's massive number of endemic species. And I never cease to be amazed at how valuable our crew information is. And even like more recently now, just getting the depth of time that we couldn't see within the first few years. But now we can really see how our volunteers have given us information that's not just filling in all the spatial gaps, but also filling in the time gaps of what's happening to different species at different times. And what is so striking for me is that back in 2004 and 5, when we just started, I was very involved in doing the red list assessments, and we would sit with the in the herbaria actually trying to understand the species threat status from a few specimens. And now, for so many of those where we thought we had 3 or 4 places the species occurs, now we just have multiple records, because crew has gone systematically through the landscape, and also other botanists that are feeding into the work we do. But you know, our crew network is now quite broad, so it's all types of botanists, and the iNaturalist platform has also helped us massively. But through, you know, we've grown crew into iNaturalist, and we run all these amazing projects now on iNaturalist to gather the data from the crew program, and those data are just unbelievable. And so for me, the where I used to have like scanty information, like you can imagine a painting with like a few abstract stripes, we now have a very clear picture for every species of what's actually going on. And it's only due to the fact that we have so many people looking for these plants and recording them and giving us the detailed information about how many are actually there and what their threats are. And then the other thing that I think is just unbelievable is how often our volunteers have found things that are really cryptic and difficult to tell one thing from another. You know, I was working on Geyseriza pilosa yesterday, and it looks very much like Geyseriza aspera. And, you know, it's only our crew volunteers who managed to pick it up in the last 20 years. And so very, very impressive that ability to discern things that are actually quite cryptic. And yeah, I think that for me, I feel like we've really achieved our goals. We've also taken that information, this detailed information, and we've really made sure it goes to the right places. So we have this database of all the records that come from crew via iNaturalist now. Before it went in by forms, we used to capture the data. And then it goes into our red list database, feeds assessments, but then it also feeds directly into the decision-making process, into every EIA through the Department of Environment, the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries EIA screening tool. So really, we've made sure that this data is actually used constantly. It goes into all the provincial conservation plans, all of those pipelines. And I don't know of any other country where citizens are used to do such complicated monitoring, like difficult species to identify across multiple families, across multiple genera, really hard with such high diversity, that data is then used into the decision making that happens every day for biodiversity conservation. So yeah, I think we've achieved our goals, and we obviously still have gaps though, which is that the gaps are very much around, there's still species that we haven't yet found, and there's still places that we haven't done enough work. I mean, because of the huge diversity of our flora, we will always have gaps, I think, but that makes it all the more challenging.
Yeah, and also a lot more satisfying when we do fill those gaps. Cool. I think Ismail, we'll go to you first. What has been your best kind of surprise? So we spoke about the beginning and what the aims were of the program, but now you know, 20 years later, what's come out that you hadn't thought about in 2003?
Yeah, Rupert, I think apart from all the amazing discoveries that we've made and, you know, exciting things we found, I think for me, one of the, from going from the start of the program to now, was to see the growth of our volunteers in terms of their knowledge of plants, and not just, you know, being able to like identify a few blommerkies, but to actually like deeply look at, you know, taxonomic revisions and try and work out, you know, what species they were looking at, and all the kind of processes that they went through to be able to learn plants, and not just like knowing the names of the plants, but also, you know, being quite detailed in terms of their taxonomic knowledge. I think that was really one of the great surprises for me from when we started this program. And you know, today many of our volunteers, you know, they've reached a level that is kind of equivalent to, or yeah, I would say in certain local areas, they're equivalent to like kind of expert taxonomists in terms of like what they know about what plants grow in the area, how to differentiate between different species. And I think that's really been one of the strengths of Crew, is that you have these amazing, you know, amateur botanists that have really grown the plant knowledge and have been able to not only contribute data for the red list, but also have been able to contribute very valuable kind of information for plant taxonomy as well.
Cool. Tilla, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just to say some of them are so inspired that they are actually becoming taxonomists. And we have two here in the garden route. Dave is starting on the phylicas and Red on the Parbhoo-Mohans.
And that pipeline for me is also, as someone who's been involved for a long time, is something that we could really not have anticipated. But it just makes sense. Okay. I think, are there any last thoughts that you want to give to the volunteers or anyone from BotSoc that might be watching?
Ismail, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, we say this in every opportunity we get, you know, in the newsletters, on, you know, our annual reports, and you know, we can't thank the volunteers enough. I mean, they put in huge amounts of work, and as Stella mentioned early on, you know, there's no other example of a crew track program anywhere else in the world with, you know, the type of commitment and, you know, like real how can I say, sacrifice that our volunteers have made for the program. And you know, it's been 20 years, and some of those volunteers have been, you know, they've been contributing for that long of a time. And remember that most of these volunteers, you know, when we started working with them, they had just retired, and so they were in their, you know, 60s, late 60s, 70s, and they still managed to, you know, to contribute so vibrantly to the program. And I think that's really, you know, the most amazing thing about the volunteers that have participated and contributed to Crew. And just, you know, to say once again, you know, thank you to everybody for you know, for the hard work that they put in, and we can see the fruits of their labor in like a very well defined red list that we have for the country. And then also for the partners that we have, I mean, it wouldn't be possible for Crew to run so long without the support of BotSoc and the Mapula Trust. And you know, and they've really supported the program strongly, and we really owe it to them to have kept this program going for so long. So we must just thank our funders and volunteers for all their support and over the last 20 years.
Anything?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that last point. I think one of the critical factors of success for Crew has been this long-term support that we've got. The BotSoc started in 2006, and Mapula very close after that, I think in 2009. And we've had long-term funding to organizations. So we are extremely fortunate. And then SANBI has also put in significant support to this work. It is our mandate, but it is also important to recognize many governments don't actually put in any of this type of work. So through the coordination of staff. So I think the partnership has been excellent between BotSoc and SANBI, and with the support of Mapula, we've managed this. And then, yeah, I just want to say that it's very important to stress that the job is far from done. Fortunately, our volunteers are of all ages now. We did start mostly with retired individuals, but now we have a real cross section of ages, and we work across the country. And with the current pressures facing plants, we have this massive poaching endemic, as we've heard about in other BotSoc webinars before. We have the climate change problem, which is quite significant, and ongoing pressure from habitat loss, and then invasive species is also terrible. So the situation is constantly changing. So despite the fact that we have 20 years of amazing information, we constantly need that updated field information. And so I just want to encourage all the volunteers to keep going. I mean, it's incredible, this network that we've got, the pipeline that we've developed, but we can only continue to do our plants justice if we can continue to monitor them. And I hope you all enjoy the incredible privilege of seeing these species that, I mean, we're so lucky to have this absolutely amazing diversity. And I think we're even luckier that we get to observe them so closely and really check for those rare jewels and find them in the landscapes. So guys, keep going. And we really want to see another 20 years at least.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rupert.
Cool. I think just in my capacity as a volunteer, former official and former BotSoc person, I want to thank you both for your contribution, because at the end of the day, if you hadn't been fun to work with, then we wouldn't have stuck around. So you guys also keep going well and enjoy being in the field while we're on a webinar. And it's going to be a bumper spring in the Western Cape. So take care, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little walk down memory lane. In case you are completely new to the crew program, I will share in the chat a link to one of our first BotSoc webinars where we went into a lot more detail on crew. Okay, so Suvarna is online. Suvarna, yeah, there you are, sharing your screen. And unmute yourself. Okay, so like I've just been scrolling through it, the attendee list here. Like most people attending, I met Suvs through the crew program, and I can't even remember how long ago that was. Can you?
Yeah, I'm sure you were in the crew program before me, actually, because I joined in 2006, and yeah, you were already there. So actually from my beginning of.
Well, thank you for joining us from KZN. And Suvarna is the program manager now for the crew program. And it's, I think the beginning has been quite winter rainfall focused, but because that's where the crew started. And now she's going to give us a bit more of a national picture and bring us into what they've been up to and where we are now, essentially. So thanks so much, Subs.
Sure. Thanks, Rupert. And thank you to the Botanical Society for affording us this opportunity as we kickstart our 20th year celebration. So I'm going to have a disclaimer that I don't have any stats that we usually show, and I just thought I'll showcase the rich program that the crew program actually is. So looking through the years, if we look at the first 5 years, obviously the crew program started in the CFR in 2003. We very quickly expanded to the national program, and then we initiated the KZN and Mpumalanga groups. As we worked towards our 10th anniversary, we began receiving funding from the Mapula us to expand into the more about plant conservation and to really have some kind of skills that will enable them to get more job opportunities and internship opportunities. So that had started way back in 2009 as well. And then we had a host of publications, the first being the National Red List Assessment on all of our plant species were published, the Medicinal Plant Project of Ponderland, which was a small publication that we published, as well as in celebration of our 10th anniversary was the Plants in Peril publication. And if you ever require these publications, they're still available via the BotSoc. So looking ahead, between our 10th and 15th year, we introduced the Crew Limpopo node, as well as started up the Gauteng Crew group. And we started being introduced to iSpot, an online data collection platform, which is data transformed or rather replaced by the iNaturalist that we're also familiar with today. We also had our first 50-50 feature just after our 10th anniversary. For our 15th anniversary, we had decided to really do an external review of the Crew program, just to see how well the Crew program is doing and what our gap areas are so that we could strategize further. We've migrated our data collection onto iNaturalist, and we started conceptualizing the GRU model, which we're hoping to now just take forward into the next 20 years. Late last year, we also created our GeoStory, which is really, really rich of information about all of our volunteers and the citizen science network that we've got. So if you haven't seen that, please also then refer to that. And then looking forward, as Tilla mentioned, we want to continue crewing, as well as then creating and conceptualizing and really implementing the GRU program, which is going to be the growers of rare and endangered wildflowers. And this is really around the decade of restoration. Oopsie. So looking now at the various projects, first and foremost is our plant monitoring projects. And here we've got a subset of different projects. And actually, this is the main objective of the Crew program, is to monitor plant species. So apart from monitoring our taxa of conservation concern, we also then rediscover species. And because we're in the field so often, our volunteers are able to find new species, as well as look at species with range extensions. So those species which we didn't know extended to different localities and distribution ranges. And this is really important information for red list assessments. We've also got a few critical habitat species, and we managed to monitor at least a third of our critical habitat species, and these are species that occurs in less than 10 kilometers squared radius. And importantly, we survey undersampled sites because we really want to look at remnant patches and really find more populations of our threatened species in these areas. On to ex situ conservation projects. We're all very familiar with the Cape Floristic region node interest in Marasmodis genus. In fact, we've actually got a species named after the Crew program, Marasmodis cruiana. And we've done quite a lot of work with funding received for recovering Marasmodis undulata. And then Tilla's mentioned earlier around the illegal succulent trade, and there's also been really lovely webinars about the succulent trade and what's going on nationally. So the Crew program took on that priority and started doing a host of field work in the Northern Cape, and has still been prioritizing this work. On to biodiversity stewardship. So we've been engaging with various provinces over the years. And we've done site surveys with both private and communal landowners, as well as then survey sites and flag sites for stewardship officials to go and look at. And that's what the map is actually showing here, the sites that Crew in the CFR has really prioritized. Again, showcasing all of the work that we do with our universities. So here's just a snapshot of the 24 HEIs that we work with. And here we do both field trips as well as lectures. And this has been taken on quite a lot by the different universities and giving the students an eye-opening experience around resources in the biodiversity sector and creating research projects and various other opportunities within the sector that they could look at. We're all very familiar with the Crew annual workshops. In fact, we host workshops annually in the Cape Floristic region as well as in the summer rainfall region. And I'm sure with these pictures, just doesn't do justice, but really takes us back to those visits and to those different sites that we've been to. Quite remarkable areas. Our workshops are really an opportunity for us to engage with our volunteers, for our volunteers to showcase their exciting finds over the previous field season, and then also to add identification courses and also just informative lectures that just enriches our workshops. Yeah, you can see the numbers there with both the CFR and SRR workshops. The pandemic did stop our in-person workshops, but actually it's also then created us having engagements on a quarterly basis online. And last year then we had a bumper BioBlitz workshops across the Western Cape, as well as here in KZN, whereby we spent a 2-day weekend just enjoying being in the veld. We also play quite a lot of focus on identification courses. So whether it's plant families or a specific plant genus, that really trying to get our volunteers encouraged into looking at species and identifying species to identifying taxa to species level. And yeah, it's just a host of different courses that's really enriched our experience around plant identification. We also have quite a close relationship with the herbaria across the country, and very frequently our volunteers actually go into the herbarium and assist with tasks, as well as informing a relationship with collecting specimens and prioritizing stuff for the taxonomist research and general revisions. Oopsie. Sorry. And then looking at iNaturalist, which we're all very familiar with, and we've been participating in both the City Nature Challenge and the Great Southern BioBlitz international events for 5 years now. And whilst there's many interesting, exciting, enriching stats and stories to share about these events, I'd like to draw your attention to just 2 things. The first is the participation of people across the different cities. And you can see just the number of cities that's participated over the past 5 years has really increased, and we continue to increase our participation. And then here looking at the threatened species, and I've just focused on City Nature Challenge because this event is held outside of our prime fieldwork time. And City Nature Challenge happens actually in the spring of the Northern Hemisphere, which is at the end of April. But if you look at the number of threatened plant species we've recorded each year, that is quite something for us to really celebrate on. So if you haven't been convinced about CNC and GSB, I really encourage you to take the opportunity to start participating. And just to wrap up, looking at some key ingredients for Crew success. And I really firmly believe that it boils down to 3 things, which is funding, people, and the effort of the Crew program. So we've been really privileged in getting a variety of funding to do the different work packages and projects that we do, but also for us to have interns come on board. And then with regards to our people, we're all familiar that the crew teams pretty old within the team. So a lot of us have joined from the inception of the program, but also our volunteers have also joined from the inception and are still very much still crewing with us. So we're really, really dedicated and passionate and really fortunate to have the network that we have. We play a strong focus in building capacity and mentoring people from both young and old students, and really just getting opportunities and awareness out there for people really interested in plant conservation. And we really connect people with a wide range of stakeholders. So it's not just working with citizen scientists, but it's bringing in conservation agencies and academics into the program and enriching field trip experience for the citizen scientist. In terms of effort, and here Tilla touched base on the CREW program being national and really promoting national information, and we really informing national resource governance by a variety of things. Contributing to the plant conservation strategy targets is just but one, and is a host of different things encapsulated there. We're providing data to the National Red List of Plants data set. We are mainstreaming data into decision making. So from management plans to conservation assessment reports, the screening tool that Tilla mentioned, systematic biodiversity plans in provincial as well as municipal levels, and then conducting both in situ and ex situ conservation practices. And that's quite a load chunk of work that would never have been possible without the support of our funders, as well as with our passionate citizen scientists. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much to our program, as well as our sister team in the red listing team, working both with plants and animals, and really say thank you so much to all of our crewdites for 20 years of remarkable work, and here's to the next 20 and more. Thank you.
Thanks, Suvarna. So that is quite a chunk of work. And I think in this longevity, and we're pretty much just getting going, it just shows what is needed to effect change in a space. And we've had 20 years now, which is a good basis. And now we just need to keep on pushing. And yeah, sorry, I am getting a little bit misty idea, because CREW's been a formative place for me, and I think many other people as well. And also just the fact that, you know, along the way we've gained and lost many contributors, and we just want to also remember them as people who've touched our path and also contributed towards plant conservation. Okay, so we're going back to the recordings, and I decided to, you know, when you've had so many volunteers, it's very hard to just pick a couple, but we went for someone who was a volunteer right in the beginning, and someone who's a relatively new volunteer. So our first volunteer is Karen Marais, who is and now working at the herbarium at Macquarie University. She's an ecologist. And let me just cue her up. So I'm here with Karen Marais. Good evening from my side, and good early morning there in Sydney. Karen, you're one of the early adopter CREW volunteers that I met in probably about 2004. So could you tell us a little bit about what it was like getting involved in CREW in those early days?
Yes, it was great. So I was part of the Friends of the Tigerberg, and Ismail and Tilla contacted us and asked us if we wanted to get involved in the program. And so that's where it started. And it didn't take long before we had a handful of very enthusiastic plant people in the group, and that were willing to go out on a regular basis. And that's basically how it started. And in the early days, Ismail and Tilla, either both or sometimes just the one, went with us, and they showed us the way. And we learned so much from them. And yeah, because none of us had any botanical background, really. It was just an interest. And we started going out to the areas around Durbanville and Belleville. And from there, just, we spread out and went further and further, and went looking for stuff they wanted us to find. And the thrill of finding it, or even better, finding something that hasn't been described yet, was even better.
Yeah.
Or finding something that was critically endangered, or finding something that was thought to be extinct in the wild. That was, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. So it was just, I think we were hooked.
Yeah. I think what really struck me in those early days, and now we're kind of used to it, is how quickly people in that group became like local experts, in terms of knowing the flora really well, and in your area pretty much better than some of the existing specialists. So what kind of impact did being in the plants like that have on your kind of life trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I started off as a physio, ended up being an amateur botanist running around the field weekly. And it took me back to university, and I ended up with a master's in fire ecology. And, through other life changes, we ended up in Australia, and now I'm a curator of a herbarium at Macquarie University. So that's where I ended up.
So the plant bug worked.
Yes.
So then you mentioned when we spoke before hitting record, just that you've been looking for crew ever since.
Yes, I mean, since coming to Australia, that was the first thing I looked up. I wanted to find something that was similar, and I'm still looking. So I haven't found any program that that allows volunteers to be just do something so meaningful. And I haven't found anything. I mean, you can go and do iNaturalist stuff, but it's not there's no structured program as crew in Australia.
Right. Cool. So do you have any messages for the crew team and also the volunteers and BotSoc members out there?
Yes, I can just say, go and embrace the opportunity that you get through crew, and go out there and look for species and fill the knowledge gaps that are there, because I guess they're still there. It's an amazing opportunity to be out in the field and to go and do that type of work. Go out and smash it.
Cool. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.
I think the kind of theme that flows through here is that thing of seeing a gap and filling the gap. So as you heard from Domitilla Raimondo, some of the crew members in Garden Route are doing becoming taxonomists themselves, looking at genera that haven't had revisions for a while. Karin became a botanist through being in field, and I think that's the springboard effect of the crew program. So if you're on the call and new to the business, stick around and we'll make an expert out of you. Okay, so our next speaker is Arista Botha. She's a former PhD student, scientific writer and mother of two. You will hear from one of them through the recording. And she is based up in Johannesburg. Hi, Arista. So you're one of the newer crew group leaders. Can you just give us an indication of how that's going up in Gauteng?
Hello, Rupert. It's good to talk to you today. Yes, as a new crew member here in Gauteng, I rely a lot on the expertise of other people, with me being younger and less experienced. And it's great because we have lots of awesome people here in Gauteng who help me a lot with the organization, and it's been really great working with them and meeting other like-minded people. And yeah, we do field trips here in Gauteng, all the way from all over, basically, from the deep in the south to the far east, far north, everywhere. So wherever we find a nice field site, depending on our target species, of course.
You've been involved since 2019 and obviously quite involved with the Bankenveld branch as well. Give us a little bit of an indication of how it felt to kind of integrate the BotSoc crew situation up there in terms of it's a different combination.
Yes, so basically, as part of being part of the Bankenveld committee, my portfolio is citizen science, which fits in nicely with the crew. And then on top of that, I also do organize the City Nature Challenge and the Great Southern BioBlitz events for Joburg, for the as part of crew and as part of BotSoc. And it's been really, really great seeing that how citizens and normal people can have a great impact on plant conservation, and that has been really inspiring. I've really enjoyed it.
So you actually do have a formal background in ecology, and a lot of the volunteers that. How does that feel to almost implement that already?
Yes, so I did a degree in botany and zoology, and then I continued with a master's and started a PhD more towards zoology, actually, not in botany. But I think it does help a little bit to have a bit of a botany background. Although I've met lots of amateur botanists who know more than me. So it's definitely not a requirement for being involved in crew. But it has helped me, and it's been really nice. I felt like for the first time since I started my studies, I actually feel like I'm contributing to conservation, which is the reason why I started studying in the first place. So it's been a real nice application of my studies.
Cool. And then finally, do you have any messages for crew, the team, or your fellow BotSoc members going forward after 20 years of crew?
So basically just keep up the good work and keep on doing what you're doing. Keep on loving plants and enjoying nature and being outdoors, and just know that you're making a difference in the conservation of plant species in South Africa.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so it was good to hear from Arista and little Johan, who has already been on a City Nature Challenge field trip, and I think at the age of 3 months. So that shows that just like the Wu-Tang Clan, crew is also for the children. Okay, so we have reached the end of the formal presentations. I want Suvarna to put on a camera and Mike can join me here. And people, I don't see any questions in the chat, which means we've said it all. But I think So just unmute yourself. Maybe I think what came to me throughout the kind of prep for the webinar is just this kind of transformative message that keeps on coming through, and I think at this moment in time as a country, it's good to have that sort of message. Is like, even though things are tough, there are certain things that you can just take within that you can do right now as a person and contribute. So obviously in our space, it is collection of data and better kind of contributing towards management of sites, whether they are close to us in urban settings or further away. What else do you think has struck you in the last like 50 minutes?
Yeah, I think it's also the longevity of people. So obviously that continuity helps in getting the results that we've seen. Yeah, so I'm really encouraged and really feel really great to hear that all of these volunteers have really come with us, and most of them, it's not a 20th year celebration just for the crew team, but it's actually for the crew network. And I'm sure, and I didn't play focus on any specific volunteer because I just didn't know how to choose and who to choose. And thank goodness that you had your strategy of who to choose to interview. But yeah, and that's also the reason why I've shared the geo story, because we've provided the rich stories about our citizen scientists there. Yeah, and I just feel like, there's no words to describe just how appreciative we are to our entire network. And obviously it's a huge team that we just pull together and manage to do whatever we do.
And you use the word team there, and I think that's definitely been a focus. Is very much almost like a good sports team where you have a kind of strong vision, brand, and then you make sure that you keep on refreshing people. Obviously, with crew, it's been difficult to a football team, so we can't buy in people. But but definitely, bringing on, and I remember there was a time that we were quite concerned about not attracting enough young people to the program. And now we are starting to see, like, we've got a good chunk. Obviously, we've always got a good chunk of interns, but other people coming through iNaturalist and just word of mouth almost to be part of that. And the team is starting to look solid, and I really like. It's the same with the work in the Botanical Society. This intergenerational kind of knowledge transfer, and it's essentially like a family, but better than a family because you can actually choose to be there.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about students, and the primary reason for us to engage with universities way back when we started the project was to build capacity so that we could attract interns. But actually over the years, it's just had a turnaround where even though we can't provide internship opportunities for all that we engaging with, but the students, especially in provinces that we don't even have crew work happening, that are now forcing us into getting crew work happening. For example, in Northwest, I mean, there's just not enough threatened plants in the area or in the province, but we have fantastic students who are really interested in going out and finding those long lost species. Yeah, so we've, apart from us just having those 3 coordinating roles or nodes, we've got all of the universities which also act as some kind of repository for students to then engage with the crew program.
Yeah, and I think also instructive is the work in Limpopo in terms of the combination of crew and the Botanical Society basically acting, as we've seen on the BotSoc socials recently, to get a branch up and running in that neck of the woods. So there are so many things still to be done and plans to be monitoring, but it really feels good to have this strong baseline. Okay, all I'm seeing is compliments. So no questions. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Suvarna, I'm going to do a quick ad break. But think if there's any last words from yourself as the big cheese in crew at the moment.
More like the
off
only
on.
live crewite on this call.
Yeah,
I'd like to say watch the space. As I said, this was just the opening of our 20th year celebratory occasion. So yeah, we're going to be having in-person discussions and workshops and things coming up. So we've got lots of exciting things lined up for the rest of this year. Probably also spill into the next year and within the same financial year. But yeah, we're looking forward to engaging and being with our citizen scientists across the country. Thanks, Stack.
sure. And I think if I may be so bold, I'd love a follow-up Zoom, more of a meeting that we can hear from our people everywhere, because we do have this massive network all over the place, and unfortunately by its nature the webinar is an out rather than a meeting place. So we definitely do want to have that more kind of interactive experience to just catch up with everyone, because it's so important. And as you say, we will parallel it with catching up in person and in field as we go. Great.
Oh,
Thank you so much,
Rupert, and thanks for everybody for joining in.
Okay, it's been awesome to see all the names online. Right, let me just do a final share. And remind you of a couple of really important upcoming dates. So the 1st of July, which is this Saturday, is the Botanical Society AGM. So if you're a BotSoc member, you would have already had a email prompting you to vote or to attend live on Saturday. And then our next webinar, it's indicative of how long we've been doing this, is around the succulent poaching crisis, but also an update, because we all know by now what the issue is, that many plants are being removed from the wild, but we don't always hear about what the response has been, and how we've been pulling together as a plant conservation network to make sure that we are better equipped to deal with this threat. So please join us in a month's time. Go out and be safe. It's cold and wet down here, and I know cold across the country. And we really want everyone to be in the best shape for the field season and to go out there and record what our plants are doing. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.